Yeah, can you see the screen that I'm sharing, the notebook?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Mm, just 1 second. Okay, so anything you want to ask or clarify before we move ahead from the last class? No?
No, sir.
Okay, so in the last class when we finished the chapter, and I think, yeah, it was you and me, right? We were discussing till the end that today we are going to talk about um, the microbes in human welfare, right? So did you go back and read the chapter on your own, the portion that I told you?
Yes.
Okay, do you have any doubts, anything you want to ask from that part, from that portion?
No, sir. It's clear.
Okay, so one part that I said that we will be covering and we will be talking about majorly was um, sewage treatment, right? Sewage treatment plant, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, just give me, there's some issue. Give me 1 second, some issue with okay, cool. This is sorted. Yeah, so I told you that we will be talking about how microbes, how we use microbe, or in other words, how microbes help us with the sewage treatment. And why is that important? Because um, of two reasons. One is the kind of societal setup that we live in. We realize that um, we have an intensive, very extensive network of sewers and waste management that mostly runs beneath every city. And if that's not properly handled, then in recent times, in the last 20, 30 years, we have realized that we go on to pollute the freshwater resources, and that creates a lot of pressure and burden on healthcare and also on resources availability. So it's not like if we pollute rivers, we'll only have to deal with, you know, uh, scarcity of fresh water. We will also have to deal with many health issues because you have to spend as a society on healthcare more, because there'll be more and more bacterial, viral, basically microbial infection and attack through water, spread through water. So waterborne diseases will increase. And second, we'll have to also invest in treating the water to make it clean so that it's fit for drinking, right? Because fresh water is limited, as you know, correct? So instead, a good solution is if we can treat the waste before we dump it in the rivers. And the thing is that we have to dump it in the river because there's no other solution, because rivers take it away. And also, if there is a amount of microbial or organic waste or matter present in that river which is below a limit, it gets used up, right? It gets used up in the ecosystem by the naturally living bacteria and other organisms in the river. So it becomes very important that we take correct measures and we learn how to treat wastewater. So any idea like what kind of, so we have studied biotechnology. We know that we can take help of biotechnology to do various things. But any idea what kind of solutions or what kind of steps we can take to for sewage treatment? And for, you understood why it is important, but what can we do about ever increasing sewage treatment? Anything that we can do? Iram, Parker, what do you think we can do? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yep. So we have a problem in front of us. And what do you think we can do for that problem? So the problem is we have a lot of waste, and that waste contains harmful bacteria that can cause disease, right? So what should we do? How can we use the same or different microbes in sewage treatment? And by the way, if we are just to pinpoint in which direction we have to think, we know that the waste component, the major constituent of the waste that is generated from cities and it runs through the sewers is basically the human waste, human and animal waste, the fecal matters. Now, this wastewater, because water is a large amount of water is required to take this fecal matter away, is called sewage, right? So it's clear that it contains lots and lots of organic matter and pathogens, like pathogenic microbes, non-pathogenic microbes, everything, right? So it's not safe to just discharge it into the water bodies because that will be too much of an overload of pathogenic and non-pathogenic microbes for the normal ecosystem of the water to handle, right? Correct? So it's important that before we put it in the rivers, we treat it. And that's why in every city, when it's planned, one thing that's planned for sure is the sewage treatment plants. Correct? So so let's follow. Wait, where's the pen? Yeah, let's follow this way to understand.
Sir,
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
sir, is sewage treatment the same as drainage system?
So drainage system is everything before sewage treatment. So all the drainage system that runs basically beneath the cities, under the roads, beneath the roads and everything, they carry all that waste from every household. And just that pipeline, that network that carries the waste is called the drainage system, correct? Now the drainage system has to go somewhere and end somewhere, right? There has to be a sink of it. So normally people in earlier times used to think that, okay, if we dump everything in the river, it's fine, nature will clean itself up over time because it's basically organic matter. And in nature also, naturally, animals, fish, everything that lives in water and everything that lives around water defecate, throw up a lot of waste in the water, right? So when these rivers run through the forests, a lot of even animals die in the river and their bodies are dumped in the river, or they fell in the river and die, and their bodies over time decompose. And but still, river is a source of fresh water, right? So people used to think that nature will take care of it and nothing to worry. But over time, as cities started growing, drainage systems become more and more and more extensive and started carrying tons and tons of these human and animal fecal matter waste. And over time, we realized that it's overwhelming even for a river system to completely you know, neutralize everything that we are dumping in the river. So we knew that we shouldn't dump chemicals and plastics and all these things in the river, but we thought that maybe dumping sewage is okay, but that's not. So we have to treat it. So we have to establish a sewage treatment plant that comes at the end of the drainage system that you are talking about. So it is mostly, cities are divided into different sectors, and from these different sectors, all the drainage, the sewage goes to these plants, gets treated here, and then it is safe to be dumped in the nearby river or the water body. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So it's basically that what you're asking. So we have cities, they generate sewage waste that goes through the drainage system, and a well-developed city is that has a well-developed drainage system. And these drainage system reach sewage treatment plants. Okay. Now, in these sewage treatment plants, basically all the science happens. Now we have to do two things. First is, what is the whole procedure and where are we using microbes in this procedure? So first thing, we do two kind of treatments. One is called primary treatment. To everything that's coming, all the drainage that's coming, there is a primary treatment, and there is a secondary treatment. Okay. Now, what comes in primary treatment? So this is basically physical treatment, physical removal of large and small particles from the sewage. And it's very simple. Since it is physical, we do not use any kind of microbes or chemicals in primary treatment. We just use the concept of filtering out larger particles or sedimenting out larger and smaller particles from the sewage water. Okay. So basically, not everything needs to go for the microbial treatment. Okay. So in this stage, either, so there are two kind of debris that can be present in a water, in a sewage water. One is that floats, and the other is that's heavier and sinks. So whatever floats can be removed by filtration. Correct? Make sense? Filtration and sedimentation. So what happens is the big uh, mm, vessels, not, they shouldn't be called vessels, but they are containers like swimming pools, bigger than that also, very, very big containers are filled with this sewage water. And first thing is filtration, everything that floats. It could be, other debris like waste, plastics, something like a wood or anything that floats. You remove all of that, and then through sedimentation you remove the soil, pebbles that come along with the sewage. Okay. So you can write down, filtration removes floating debris and sedimentation removes heavier particles like soil and pebbles. Okay. And during sedimentation, everything that settles down, it won't just be soil and pebbles. We know that it also will contain organic matter, which will have a lot of bacterial load in it. So everything that settles during this process is called sludge. So because it's coming from the primary treatment, it's called primary sludge. And remember this primary sludge because this is important. This primary sludge is it contains organic matter plus bacteria, lots and lots of bacteria. Okay. So this primary sludge is not all, you cannot just throw it just like that. So there is a way to get rid of or decompose this primary sludge that comes out after sedimentation also. Now, everything that settles is called the sludge, and all the supernatant that remain, that is the liquid part, is called the effluent. And all this effluent from the primary treatment goes into secondary treatment. Is it clear?
Yeah.
So effluent from primary treatment goes for secondary treatment. Now here, there's a different tank in which all this liquid goes, and in the secondary treatment, what is done is where we use the concept of using microbes for our benefit and do some biochemistry. So when the primary effluent comes, first thing that is done, so secondary treatment has some steps. First thing that's done is aeration. Now, aeration simply means, so there are large tanks in which this primary effluent is stored, and constantly you can do two things. Mostly these two things are done together. One is you keep agitating it mechanically, and to agitate you can just put a rotor at the bottom. You understand agitation, right? People, yeah. So agitation makes bubbles, which means this is a way of mixing the air in the atmosphere with the water. So agitation along with pumping air. You can also pump air in it. Okay. And this, what does aeration achieves? Why are we giving, basically what we are giving is we're giving oxygen to all that primary effluent. And why are we doing this? One thing that the primary effluent will be very bad in is oxygen, right? Because all this water is running down through the sewers, and you won't expect lot of living organisms like fish or something to survive in that. So basically nothing survives in the sewer water, right? It's just the anaerobic bacteria that does not require oxygen. So first thing that we need to do is we need to allow or pump the growth of aerobic bacteria, aerobic microbes. Now, these aerobic bacteria are useful to us, and I'll let you know how and why. So first thing is, how will aerobic microbe grow? When you will give them air or oxygen, basically, right? So that's why aeration is being done. So it allows growth of aerobic microbes. So the whole fluic and microbes, now we are allowing aerobic microbes to come into it. They also allow fungus to grow with it, and the fungus grow as filaments and form a mesh-like network in this dirty water, and that mesh-like network again allows lots and lots of bacteria to grow on it, like it kind of acts like a template. Okay, and this is called flock. So this was a question that came in NEET. What are flocks? FLOCS. So flocs are aerobic bacteria or aerobic microbe associated with fungal filaments. Aerobic bacteria associated with fungal filaments. So flocs is a complex structure of multiple microbes, bacteria and fungi. And as a whole, flocs depends on oxygen. So it's aerobic in nature. Okay, so if you want to sustain flocs, you have to keep giving aeration to that effluent, primary effluent. Now, why are we doing this? What is one thing that aerobic bacteria can do, which the anaerobic bacteria, which were already present in the sewage water, were unable to do? Tell me.
They can increase the oxygen demand.
They can increase the oxygen demand. In fact, oxygen demand will be increased when oxygen levels will deplete, isn't it? So demand and supply follow the inverse rule. Uh, the demand will increase when the supply will decrease, right? So in fact, when we are giving oxygen ourselves, it basically reduces the oxygen demand in that effluent because we are providing oxygen. So whoever is demanding that oxygen is getting the demand fulfilled, right? So if like 100 people want something in a society and you give 50, so 100 people want a cap, you allowed 50 caps in the market. Now only 50 people will need a cap. You allowed 25 more. Now just 25 people will need a cap. So the demand over time will keep on decreasing if the supply increases. Do you understand that, Iram?
Yeah.
So when we will aerate the primary effluent, and that's why I wanted to discuss this topic in detail because questions come on this part. It has some concept. So when we will aerate, aerobic microbes will grow, and we need that because one thing that aerobic bacteria and aerobic microbes can do is they can eat up or they can consume organic matter in the presence of oxygen. They can do oxidative degradation, or you know what we call as respiration, right? So in respiration, what basically we do as humans, we are also consuming or breaking up starch or any carbon source in the presence of oxygen, correct? Anaerobic bacteria do not use oxygen, so they just rely on glycolysis. Aerobic bacteria also relies on glycolysis only, basically, but they can use oxygen for that. So when we give lots and lots of oxygen, while growing, all these aerobic microbes can consume a bulk of the organic matter in the effluent. And most of that organic matter that they consume is containing carbon and nitrogen. So basically they are complex matter. So because when humans defecate, we are we are excreting nitrogenous waste from the body, correct? Ammonia, urea, uric acid, all these things. Does that make sense, Hiram?
Yeah.
So here we are using some biochemistry of these aerobic microbes, and write down the aerobic microbes. The aerobic microbes consume a major part of the organic matter in the effluent. And what does this mean? If a major part of the organic matter is consumed, the effluent is less toxic now, right? And because of this, what Iram said, going along those lines, the BOD, which is biochemical oxygen demand of the effluent, will decrease, will reduce. Okay. So by growing aerobic bacteria, you also reduce the BOD, biochemical oxygen demand of the effluent. And BOD is a very good marker to assess that how polluted a water body is. If you collect water from a water body and check its BOD, and if the BOD is high, it means it's very, very polluted, because lots and lots of organic matter is just present in that water and is not being oxidized or not being consumed. But if the BOD is less, it's more and more a pure water. So distilled water will have BOD 0 because there'll be no organic matter in that water that needs to be consumed or degraded using oxygen, right? Make sense? You know?
Yes, sir.
So you can write at a corner here, if there is a dirty or polluted water, then it will have a high BOD. And if it is clean water, it has low BOD. No confusion from now onwards? Is it clear, Iram?
Yes.
Yeah. So, so we treat the sewage water by aeration until the BOD is reduced and comes to a level which is acceptable. And as I told you, the greater the BOD, the more polluting, the more polluting is the water, or the water has more polluting potential. And once the BOD is reduced and comes under a level which is acceptable, uh, then the effluent is transferred from that particular tank where it was being aerated into another tank where nothing happens. There, the water is just left untouched for settling. So that's called a settling tank. So after aeration, write down the B. The second thing that happens is settling. So the whole purpose of aeration was to reduce the BOD. Okay. And then in settling tanks, write down, the bacterial flocks are allowed to settle. Bacterial flocks. Remember flocks? Aerobic bacteria plus fungal filaments. So that is no longer required. So it is allowed to settle. Or sediment. So settle at the bottom. Okay. And this thing now, which has settled at the bottom, is again called sludge, but it's not primary sludge. It's called secondary sludge or activated sludge. And why it is called activated sludge? See, because the primary sludge was only waste, fecal matter, and anaerobic bacteria. It didn't have activated aerobic bacteria in it. But this sludge is different. So how is secondary sludge different from primary sludge is also a question. Do you understand how it's different, Iram?
Yeah.
Yeah. So secondary sludge is activated sludge that contains aerobic bacteria and fungal filaments associated together. And this sludge has the capability to reduce the BOD of polluted water, right? So that's why this sludge is not thrown, and some portion of this activated sludge is kept stored, and it is used again in the aeration tank for the next set of effluent, because it's a continuous process. When we transfer the effluent from the primary container where it was aerated into the settling tanks, more water comes into the aeration tanks, and activated sludge from the settling tank is pumped back into aeration tank as an inoculum. Okay, do you understand that? People, is it clear? So this activated sludge, some part of it is put back. Okay, small portion is pumped back into aeration tanks. Basically, it's called inoculum to make the process faster, but still a lot of it will be left. So now let's come to decompose, how to decompose. So the primary sludge is decomposed by, it's, you can just bury it by burying in ground or dump it in the ground. Okay, and the secondary sludge, some part of it is sent back, and the major part is pumped into third tank, which is tank C. They are called anaerobic sludge digester. So it's sent into this. So let me put it better. Yeah, so it comes into this here. Major portion for digestion. Now, what happens here is in anaerobic sludge digesters, we grow or we allow anaerobic bacteria to grow, right? Anaerobic bacteria grow. And these bacteria basically digest and eat up the aerobic bacteria and the fungi present in the sludge, in the activated sludge. Is that clear? Digest the aerobic bacteria plus fungal filaments. Basically, these two make the flocks in the secondary sludge. So everything gets digested up, whatever is excess. But the problem here is that from this anaerobic sludge digestion, because these are anaerobic bacteria, so they cannot produce just CO2, right? So they produce a mixture of gases during digestion, right? Mixture of gases are produced during the digestion, and these gases are basically not just CO2, it is mostly largely methane, CH4, and what else is there? Hydrogen sulfide, H2S, and CO2, of course. So methane, hydrogen sulfide, and carbon dioxide. All these gases are produced. And the question is what to do with these gases. So any idea? What to do with these gases? Simple. These are, what are they? They are flammable. So this is what is known as the biogas. So whatever comes out as a gaseous byproduct from the anaerobic sludge digesters form the biogas, and it can be used as a source of energy. Okay, because it's inflammable. Make sense? So we are not
Yes.
just solving the issue of treating the sewage, we can also get a source of energy out of it at the end, because we in a very coordinated manner have used microbes for our benefit. So if we go back again and see what we have done, so the sewage waste that is generated comes through drainage system into the sewage treatment plants. There is basically two type of treatments that done. First is the physical treatment, which is called primary treatment. It involves filtration and sedimentation, and everything that is sedimented or taken out from this primary treatment is called the primary sludge. It is basically organic matter and bacteria, mostly inorganic bacteria. Sorry, um, anaerobic bacteria. There's nothing like inorganic bacteria. Anaerobic bacteria, and that is decomposed. You can just decompose it, and then comes whatever is left is the effluent. The primary effluent comes to secondary treatment. In the secondary treatment, there are three things. First is aeration in the aeration tanks, where they are where that effluent is agitated and pumped with air continuously. That allows growth of aerobic bacteria. So first, we are allowing aerobic bacteria to grow because they will eat up all the organic debris in the effluent. And once that happens, the BOD will reduce and the water will be comparatively more cleaner, but still not fit for drinking or any other human use, but comparatively more cleaner. Then we will allow that to go to settling tanks where all that bacteria, aerobic bacteria, and the fungal filaments will be left undisturbed. And this will allow all the flock to settle down because it's a heavy particle. It was only floating here because of constant aeration and agitation. Once that settles, it's left for weeks and sometimes even months, depend on how much of water that tank contains. Once everything settles, that is called activated sludge. A part of activated sludge is sent back to the aeration tank so that it acts as inoculum, and major portion is sent to the third tank, which is anaerobic sludge digester, where on the contrary, opposite kind of bacteria, which are anaerobic bacteria, are now allowed to grow. And these bacteria are chosen so that they are the kind of bacteria that eat up eat up aerobic bacteria and fungus. So they digest all the aerobic bacteria and fungal filaments in the secondary sludge. And when they are doing so, they produce gas, and that gas is stored and contained, and that's called biogas, and it can be used as a source of energy. Now, what happens to this anaerobic bacteria that we have grown in anaerobic sludge digesters? What to do with this? It's very simple. It's
We can,
very, yeah, we can.
yeah, we can further use for other sewage treatment.
But how? Sewage itself has a lot of anaerobic bacteria in it. How are you going to use it for sewage treatment? Or you mean to say just keep it there and keep pumping more and more secondary sludge in it? Are you saying that, Iram?
Yeah, that could also be done.
But after some point of time, you will realize that the anaerobic bacteria is just continuously growing and growing. It cannot grow indefinitely, right? At some point of time, you don't need anything. You want to kill this also, or at least some part of anaerobic bacteria that you are growing in these sludge digesters. And thankfully, it's very easy to kill anaerobic bacteria. Just pump some oxygen, right? So anaerobic bacteria do not like oxygen. The moment you give them oxygen, they die. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can control the levels of anaerobic bacteria. What you cannot control in a normal environment is the level of aerobic bacteria if it has organic matter to decompose. That's why we have to push all that activated sludge in the anaerobic sludge digester, where it gets killed and gases are produced, and that we can use as biogas. Is this thing clear to everyone? The whole pipeline?
Yes.
Rabia, what about you? Is it clear to you as well? You can write something in the chat if you are unable to speak. I just want to make sure that everything is clear so that then we can move ahead.
Yes, sir, it's clear. Actually, my internet is bad, so your voice was lagging for me.
Oh, that I'm so sorry. But could you understand too? What I'll do is I'll try to send this on the group. This whole thing. I think there is a way. Let's see. Okay, I'll try to send this. Okay, on the group.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Okay, so something which is related to this is a microbe in the production of biogas. Basically, I told you that at the end of sewage treatment also, you do get biogas, which is methane. So biogas is mostly methane and hydrogen sulfide. CO2 does not have to be present in a biogas because CO2 is not inflammable. In fact, CO2 discourages fire, right? Oxygen encourages burning and fire, but that's why there are CO2 based fire extinguishers, if you have seen, put in schools and everywhere. Have you seen CO2 based fire extinguishers? CO2 actually extinguishes fire. And if we want to make biogas, we do not need necessarily CO2. So what I'll do is I will just course correct this. So these two are active components of biogas, not CO2. But if your target is not to open a sewage treatment plant and just to use microbes for the production of biogas, what will you do? So that is the next part, which is kind of connected to this. So do you all have NCRT with you at the moment?
Yes.
Can you open this part where microbes in production of biogas is there? Rabia and Iram, please open microbes in production of biogas paragraph. Can you hear me, Rabia?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Did you open?
Yes.
Rabia, did you also open this part of the chapter?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. So it's a I think it's two paragraphs. Yeah, two small paragraphs. I want you to read these two paragraphs and try to draw parallels. So this is just using microbes to produce biogas, and you can realize that the kind of microbes that you need to make biogas are very much similar to the microbes that you were growing in anaerobic sludge digesters of the sewage treatment plant. So just read these two paragraphs, and I'm giving you 5 minutes, and let me know if you have 3 to 5 minutes, and if you have any doubt, let me know. So let's do it right now. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you both have started reading. Yes. Okay. Rabia, you understood what I said?
Yes.
You're reading, right? So cool. Let me know when you're done reading the paragraph. Okay. So, Iram, are you you're done reading? Okay, perfect. So let's just discuss it for Rabia because Rabia could not access her textbook. So basically, what did you understand, Iram? So we have to produce biogas, and which gas is the major component of biogas? And Rabia, you can note down these things. What?
CO2.
No, it's not CO2. CO2 cannot burn. If a gas is not, if a gas does not catches fire, how it is a good gas that you can use for energy? In fact, CO2 is used to extinguish fire. We want to make fire so that people can cook on that using that gas. Like LPG is a petroleum, liquefied petroleum gas. It burns. That's why it's useful. CO2 cannot burn. CO2 can extinguish fire. It's methane. it's written, I think somewhere it's written in that paragraph that the most important component is predominantly methane. Biogas is a mixture of gases containing mostly methane, CH4, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And if we have organic matter in any effluent or anywhere, and we want to digest it to produce methane, we don't have to provide oxygen, right? Because if you provide oxygen, in the presence of oxygen, everything will break down into CO2, correct? And that's how during fermentation, fermentation is an
Yes.
example where fermentation is an example where, you know, yeah, CO2 is produced. So fermentation is used for cheese making, and the holes in the cheese are mostly because CO2 passes through that, or bread making. So we don't want to do fermentation. Basically, we want the kind of bacteria that grows anaerobically on carbon source and produces methane. Okay, it will produce some CO2 for sure, but we want methane. We are not interested in the carbon dioxide component. We are interested in the methane and the H2. It also produces hydrogen gas sometimes. So all the bacteria that helps us to produce methane in large amounts, what are they called? They're called methanogens. Okay. So the bacteria that after metabolizing a carbon source produces methane are called methanogens. And I think one such bacteria is also called methanobacterium because it produces methane. So if we are interested in making a plant for producing biogas, we would like to culture the anaerobic bacteria called methanobacteria in large amounts, and then, you know, treat, like we can also take that bacteria from the anaerobic sludge digesters. Remember the anaerobic sludge digesters I just told you about? There we grow anaerobic bacteria, right? And one type of bacteria is methanobacterium. We can take these from that plant, use it here, and make a lot of methane, which is basically biogas. So how does a biogas work? Is basically it's a big tank where you put all the waste from cattles and cow, basically the cow dung, cattle dung. We mix it with a lot of water, and we just simply put it in a tank with digester, which is called digester tank, with these methanogens. So these methanogens will start eating up all the organic matter and start producing methane, hydrogen, and CO2 also, but we are mostly interested in methane and hydrogen. And then we will collect all that gas in a gas holder, right? And basically it's done. We have our biogas plant ready. Make sense, you know? So it's not very different from the anaerobic sludge digesters concept. It's just that here we are choosing a specific type of bacteria because we need methane more, not CO2. Is that clear why we don't need CO2 in biogas? Why CO2 is not an inflammable? Because it is not an inflammable gas. Is it clear, Rabia and Iram?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So other parts of this chapter, I ask you to read. Did you find any difficulty in any other part? Other parts were simply fact-based. Anything else you want me to go over in this chapter or repeat in this chapter? Yes, no? Iram, Rabia, take your time. Take some time and let me know.
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, so the next that we have to deal with are, I think, units which are ecology and biodiversity, right? So I think we should first start with the ecology, because it also contains ecosystem and some pyramids on which questions do come in both in entrances and boards. And then we can go for biodiversity and conservation. What do you people need? It can, like, you can suggest me things based on what your schools are doing at the moment, or if you are open with going anyway, then I'll suggest we start with the ecology, which is in the revised textbook. I think it's chapter 11. And what is the chapter in the um, older textbooks? 13 or something?
Yes, sir, it's 13.
13, right? It says organisms and populations. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we start with organisms and populations?
So the organism part is deleted in this chapter.
Oh, I see. Right. Great. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's also, yeah, the syllabus I have also says it's, so the organism part is gone. So we just have population. I don't know why the chapter's name still is organisms and populations, right? Very, even in the revised books, this is very funny. The chapter 11 is organisms and populations, but when you go in inside, it's just one subheading, which is populations. Anyways, perfect. So shall we go with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me note it. So what was this? Chapter 13 in your notebooks, right? So I'm just writing it as populations. Okay. Doesn't make sense actually. Organisms and populations is, so basically, I think the reason why organism part is excluded is because you also have studied a lot, something similar to organisms in when you studied in class 11th about various different organisms and how they interact with the environment. Things at an organismal level are slightly different from how they are in a population level. Now, I'm not going to go into the details, but just to give you context, in the unedited or the non-revised syllabus, there were attributes of organisms that I used to teach, and then I used to teach how the attributes or the characteristics of a population are different from organism. For example, uh, an organism has a birth and a death. Make sense? So if I talk about organism, it has a proper birth and a death, right? You agree? Every
Yeah.
organism takes birth and dies. But what about population? If I talk about a population of deer in a forest, can I tell, can I give a attribute of birth to a population, that this population was born or this population will die? Can I use these kind of terms in a study? No, right?
You should add rate as well.
Sorry, go ahead, Iram.
So birth alone won't make sense, but birth rate can.
Right, correct. So for a population, the birth does not make sense, right? So in a population, the same attribute becomes birth rate. So what we can say about a population is that this population is growing at a rate, or This is the number of offsprings that are born per year or per month or in any given fixed amount of time. So it comes rate. Now rate is anything. You know what is rate, right? Anything over time is rate, right? Now that X can be anything. Okay. So rate of velocity, if you are saying, the change in that over time or something like that. So birth rate is how many births happen per unit time. Simply, death is not a concept for population, it becomes death rate. And on the basis of these two, we can define a lot about a population. How? I can define if a population will keep on increasing or keep on decreasing in the future based on just their birth rates and death rates, right? So if the birth rate at every given time is more than the death rate, what will happen to the population in future? Rabia, if you're there.
Yes, sir.
What will happen to the population? If the
Sir,
birth
can
rate,
you? Yeah.
yeah. So the question is, if the birth rate of a population is always higher than the death rate of the population, what will happen to the population in future?
It will keep on increasing, and the country, it will become overpopulated.
Yeah, so when I was talking about population, I was not specifically talking about human population, but you are correct. Okay, so it also lies true to animal population, which they don't have their own countries. But yes, you are right. If the birth rate is higher than the death rate, the population will be ever increasing, and that is the case with human population, as we very well know. And if the opposite is true, then the population is called a declining population. And we know that in the near future, it will decline and diminish if nothing is done. Correct? Both of you, make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Similarly, what are the other things that were characteristics of organism that does not hold true for a population? Anything else? Before we go, so for a organism, there is a concept of age, right? Every organism has an age. Like this dog, this human is 30 years old, this dog is 10 years old. What about a population? Does it have an age? We
We rather keep it in category.
rather keep it in?
Category.
Yeah,
Age
so
category.
you mean to say that there is an age distribution or an age group, right? So instead of age, we have age groups or age distribution in a population. So when you talk about a population, you say that 10% of the population is in juvenile age, 20% is in adult age, and so is in old age, etc., right? So this is another criteria that changes. Anything else? For an organism, we also have the concept of sex or gender, right? So it's a male or it's a female or it's a third gender. But for a population, we do not have the concept of sex or the gender. What do we have? We have the sex ratio, right? It is a ratio, like whether an individual is either a male or a female is sex, but in sex ratio, it is the percentage of population that are males over the rest of the population that is female. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So since we have defined that, also let me tell you about how to calculate some of these. So for birth rate, what we also calculate is per capita birth or per capita death. You know how do we calculate that for any population, whether it's human or animal? Per capita birth or per capita death. What is it in the first place? When we talk about birth rate, populations can be big and small, right? But their rates is independent of their overall size, correct? For example, if I start with 100 rabbits and 50 dogs, okay? So next year, the 100 rabbits became 200. And similarly, 1 year after, the 50 dogs became 100. Still, in terms of the overall size of the population, rabbits population size is twice the size of the dog. But what about their rates? The rate of growth was same because both the population just doubled up in 1 year. Do you understand that, Hiram and Rabia? Hiram, Rabia, make sense?
So could you repeat that one?
Yes. So let's start with something here. So I started with 100 rabbits in 2022 and 50 dogs. And in 2023, I have 200 rabbits and 100 dogs. So if I ask you which population size, who has the bigger population size, you will say rabbit, correct?
Yes.
But if I ask you what was the rate at which the population growth happened, whose rate of population growth was more, rabbit or dogs? Hiram and Rabia, which population's rate of growth was more?
Rabbit.
No, it's the same for both. Because each one doubled up. We started with 100, now we have 200. 200 is double of 100. So the growth rate was 2 times. We started with 50 dogs, now we have 100 dogs. 100 is double of 50, so the growth rate here also is 2 times. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. So what also matters is the initial number with which we are. So this could be confusing because we are taking into account sheer numbers. And just by looking at it, you will say, oh, rabbits growth was much more because we have 200 rabbits and just 100 dogs. But that's not true. We also have to see from where it started, right? So the concept of per capita birth or per capita death removes that confusion. And for this purpose, how it is expressed is, let's say you start with 20 cats, okay, in 2022, and I say there is 28 cats in 2023. Okay. Now, what is the increase in the number?
8.
Yes, 8 cats more, right? So what we'll do is, and what was the initial number with which we started? 20. Now, per capita means per individual that we are saying. So if 20 cats all would have given birth to one more cat, there would have been 20 more cats. And the rate was 2x, like it was in this case, right? But that's not the case here. Only 8 more cats were added in the population. So what we'll do, we will divide 8 by 20 and it will come to 0.4. Okay, so it will be 0.4 cats per cat per year. Does it make sense? Now, in biologically, it doesn't make sense, but mathematically it does. You cannot have 0.4 cats per cat. But this is the per capita birth rate or per capita death rate that we always count for a population. Is it clear, everyone?
Yeah.
0.4 cats per cat per year. Okay. Now, for any population, to make sure whether it's declining or it's increasing, we have to account both death per capita birth and per capita death. And then on the basis of both, so per capita birth will add to the population, per capita death will take away from the population, and a sum total of which will tell whether the population is increasing or decreasing. So you tell me, what should be the per capita birth rate of a population if you want a population to be growing, ever increasing? Tricky question. Think about it. Iram? Rabia? What should be the per capita birth for a population on the basis of which I can say that this population will always keep on increasing? Rabia? Just think, it's simple. Right in front of your eyes, we have a population where the per capita birth was 0.4. And from 20, it became 28 in the next year. And if the 0.4 per capita birth like is continuous, it continues to be 0.4, then next year, what will be the number of cats in the population? Sorry? What will be the cat population if 0.4 persists?
36.
2024, what will happen in 2024? Iram says, how many uses? How many cats? 36. 36 cats. Is that correct, Rabia?
I think so.
Let's see. This is the situation. This persists, okay? And you have to find. Now, simple equation is, we don't know how many cats will add. So X upon initial population. Now, for 2024, the initial population becomes 2023. So X upon 28 is equal to 0.4 because that's persists. Can you solve this now? Can you solve for x? So x is equal to 28 into 0.4. What is it?
11.2.
11.2. So this is the number of cats that will add up. So 20 in 2024, it will be 28 plus 11.2, which is 39 cats approximately. 0.2 because they are cats. Exactly, it should be 39.2 because but there is no such thing as 0.2 cat. So there has to be 39 cats so that we can say that the rate of the per capita birth of 0.4 is continuing in the next year also. So it's not 36, it's 39. You understood why and how, Iram and Rabia?
Yes.
Okay, great. Similarly, so can you now answer my question? What should be the per capita birth for a population to be ever increasing? What is the answer? Write the question and think about it and let me know tomorrow. What should be the
Sir,
per capita?
can you repeat the question?
What should be the per capita birth for a population to be ever increasing? What should be the per capita birth of a population to be ever increasing? Written? Is the question clear?
Yes, sir.
The concept of per capita birth and per capita death clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So age distribution is simple, sex ratio is simple. Okay. Okay, now let's go and let me tell you about the age group and distribution. So let's say I divide the total population of anything into three different stages or age groups. One I'm calling as pre-reproductive, that is the juveniles, like kids that cannot reproduce yet. The other is reproductive group, and that is reproducing and adding more to the population. And then there is post reproductive, which again cannot reproduce, which means they are the old population. Okay, these are the three. Make sense?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
no? Okay. Now I will use for pre-reproductive, let me use a blue color bar. So let's say this is I'm making a population pyramid. So this is the total number of organisms that are in the pre-reproductive phase. And I'll use green for reproductive. And let's say there are slightly less numbers in the reproductive phase. and I will use red for post-reproductive, and it's even less number of organisms in the post-reproductive phase. Okay, by the area shaded. Now, if you look at this kind of a age pyramid, so this is called an age pyramid. Okay. Now, tell me, what do you think will happen to this population? Is it a expanding population? Is it a stable population? Is it a declining population? In future, so let's give some numbers also. Let's say this is 100 individuals. This is let's say this is 60 individuals, and this is 40 individuals. So total population is 200. Total is 200. So this population, this is in, let's say, in 2022. If I'll go to 2023, based on this age pyramid, what you can tell me, what you can infer? Is it an expanding population? Is it a declining population? It's going to decline in the future, or what's going to happen? We just have this information.
Expanding.
It's expanding. And why do you think so, that it's expanding population? Let's first hear from Rabia. Let me first hear from Rabia her answer, and then we can have justification if her answer is same or different. Rabia, what is your answer? What do you think? Is it expanding population? In future, it's going to expand. In future, it's going to stay the same, or it's going to decline? Oh, I think Rabia is facing some issues here. Okay, go ahead. Why do you think it's an expanding population?
So the pre-reproductive number is more. So they are the ones who's gonna predict the future. I mean, increase the future. So yeah, maybe pre-reproductive.
Yeah, right. You looked at a very good point here, but also you should look at the reproductive. What about the reproductive? So can't I argue that the reproductive phase is the organism, the reproductive group is the group that adds to the future? Currently, the pre-reproductive are not adding. So what will be your counter argument to that?
So
Yeah, go ahead.
So actually, I have a doubt in this.
Mm-hmm.
So the pre-reproductive ones are the ones who are gonna be.
It's gonna be.
Sorry, sir. The pre-reproductive ones are the ones gonna be reproductive afterwards. So the width of pre-reproductive should be similar to that of reproductive, right?
No, but it's in the current population there are 200 organisms, and let's say 100 are below the age of 13. Let's say it's a human population. 100 are kids, 60 are couples, and 40 are older grandparents. So it is very well possible. Why it has to be the same? It doesn't have to be same, right? This kind of population does exist, right? In reality also. But your rationale was correct when you said that the pre-reproductive phase in future is going to become the reproductive, and some from the reproductive phase are going to become post-reproductive. Since there is no backflow allowed, so backflow cannot happen, right? It's easier to infer because it's only one direction. The pre-reproductive, there are chances that next year the pre-reproductive either can stay in pre-reproductive or can become reproductive. but there is no
that's
chance.
true. But in the reproductive, it should be similar, right? Because they're gonna get old. The reproductive people are gonna get old. So isn't that width should be similar?
So over time, yeah, you're right. So over time, post-reproductive people are going to die because they'll be old and then they will die. Some of them will be like their place will be taken by the reproductive organisms, and the pre-reproductive organisms again will be higher. They will not decline because the reproductive ones, they will give rise. So here is a exchange. Reproductive always adds to pre-reproductive, and it also adds to post-reproductive. So there is a bimodal flow from here. So reproductive phase generates offsprings that go in this category, and they themselves go in the post-reproductive category. But the post-reproductive category never continues to become more and more than reproductive, because then they die. So they are gone. Reproductive and pre-reproductive do not, go away like that. They don't go away from a population because of death normally. Correct? We're talking about natural flow. So the pre-reproductive group, the pool, will always keep on increasing if we have a healthy reproductive pool. And the post-reproductive pool will always keep on decreasing if the natural flow of life-death cycle is happening. So we're not just talking about 1 year, we're talking about a continuous future. Make sense? Make sense, Iram?
Yes.
Yeah. So the shapes can be a little bit here and there, but there are some attributes that remain same for each type of population. So write down, this kind of population is a expanding population. And what are the attributes? First is the pre-reproductive group should be larger than the reproductive and post-reproductive group. So till the pre-reproductive is the largest group, your population is ever expanding. So that's why they say the future of any civilization or any population depends on their kids. So if it comes to saving humanity, we have to save kids. We don't have to save the oldies, but save the kids first. That's why there's the saying that kids and women first, because women can produce more offsprings, and kids can go on to give rise to new generations. So the attributes are pre-reproductive phase has to be larger. That group has to be larger than reproductive and post-reproductive. Now, let me ask you, if another example is, I'll use the same color so that it remains the same. So let's say this is in a age pyramid. This is pre-reproductive. The color coding remains the same. And then we have a equal, like you said, reproductive. And then I have, because in the post-reproductive, some will die, so slightly less post-reproductive. If this is the age pyramid, what kind of population is this going to be? Expanding? Declining? What?
Stable.
Sorry?
Stable.
Yes, this is a stable population. Why? Because the pre-reproductive ones will add to the reproductive. And again, since some will go from here to here, the number more or less will remain same. So in the near future, you will expect, if the number here to begin with is let's say 100, 95, and something around 80. So in the near future also it's going to be the same, somewhere around more or less 100, 102 in the pre-reproductive, 95, 96, something like that in the reproductive, and similar in the. So the population is not going to keep on increasing. It's going to stay fairly stable. Correct? And what should be the characteristics of a declining population? How should I make it?
The pre-reproductive should be smaller in width.
Okay, so this is the pre-reproductive. You're saying it should be, let's say if this is the size, how should I make the reproductive ones? Smaller, bigger, or equal?
A little bigger.
Bigger, right? Okay. And what about the post-reproductive?
So this
Sorry, your voice, you're mute, if you're speaking.
so this pyramid is unidirectional, right?
Unidirectional, yes.
So is it like going from top to bottom? No.
No, it's actually going from bottom to top because these are the youngest ones: juveniles, adults, old. So that's why at the top, even if it is equal to the pre-reproductive or smaller, it does not matter much because they are all post-reproductive. Population, individuals in post-reproductive stage in a population do not contribute to population in any manner. So you just have to kind of, you can ignore it even though they are there in the population to predict the future of the population as an expanding, stable, or declining. You can actually get rid of. Even if I do not look at the red bars in any of this, you can just make out the future by just looking at these two. If the pre-reproductive is more than the reproductive, it's expanding. If pre-reproductive is same as reproductive, it's stable. And if pre-reproductive is less than reproductive,
So
then it's like,
since this is
yes,
from bottom to top, so the
yeah.
number of pre-reproductive in the third case should be equal to the reproductive ones, right?
In this one, in this case, you're saying?
Yeah.
So there are 70 kids, 100 parents, and 80 oldies in a population. So next time, so the future is these 70, which are kids now, which are pre-reproductive, will become reproductive. And a lot of reproductive will go into post-reproductive. The moment they go into post-reproductive, they're of no contributing use to the population dynamics. And after that, since now there are less reproductive population, it was 100 one generation ago, now there are just 70, they will give rise to less offspring. So the in the next generation, the pre-reproductive will be just 50 or 40. And over time, it will continue to become narrow and narrow, and it will decline.
So in that case, the flow will be from top to bottom, right? Rather from bottom to top, because you're considering the reproductive to produce babies, pre-reproductive. So is it like it should be it's bi-directional, right? The pyramid.
It's no, it's this is the direction. The bidirectionality is just at these two levels. See, these 70 are going to replace the 100. The 100 are going to replace this 80. So one generation after, let's draw it. the red will be 100, the blue will be 70, and since in this case 100 reproductive individuals could give rise to 70, so in this case now when there are 70, oh I'm sorry, I choose the wrong color, this will be 70, and if 100 could give rise to 70, 70 will give rise to even lesser, so this will be 50. This is second generation time point. If we go one time point again in future, so this 70 will take place of, because they will grow old and become post reproductive, so the red one will be 70. Again, the reproductive 50 will become reproductive, so this will be 50, and 50 will give rise to less than 50 kids because this is the trend, so this will be 30. And if you keep going forward ahead in time, this population will always be declining. So if you total this 170 and 80, it's 250, right? If you total this is 220. If you total this is 150. And over time, it will keep on becoming smaller and smaller, the population. So basically the flow is from top to bottom because the bottom ones are becoming the going up the tier and then they are dying. And at this level, what you are saying is that they give rise to the population, the offsprings, right? But they give rise to offsprings. They do not become offsprings. So flow is always the flow. When we say flow, the flow of time or the flow of an individual in time is always unidirectional. You can always grow older. You can never become younger. But they give rise is something entirely a different concept. So the parents are not coming down the pyramid anytime. They will always keep going up the pyramid. The kids will take the lowermost. So you understand it's going up when we talk about the flow. So the flow is for every individual, how are they moving in the pyramid? Make sense, Iram?
Yeah.
So the easiest thing to see is, like I was saying, do not get confused ever. The easiest thing is, this is your shorthand trick. Ignore the post-reproductive population and focus on the reproductive and pre-reproductive. And if the pre-reproductive is more than reproductive, it's expanding. If pre-reproductive is same as reproductive, it's stable. And if pre-reproductive is less than reproductive, it's declining in an age pyramid. Is that clear, Iram and Rabia?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Now, and there's one more concept I want to teach you is, so this was age group distribution, and on the basis of it, how to infer expanding, stable, and declining population. The same can also, so this is a visual representation. The same can also be done just by looking at the per capita birth and per capita death number. Okay, and that was my question, that what should be the per capita birth so that the population is ever expanding. The population is an expanding population, and that answer you will give me in the next class. Okay, both of you, Iram and Rabia, give me a thumbs up if you understood. Okay, now one characteristics which only is applicable to a population is something called population density. Now, what is a population density? Because every time talking about or doing studies or taking into consideration population size is not possible. So if I ask you, tell me the population size of um, you know dogs in India, is it possible for you to tell me the population size of dogs? How many dogs are there in India? It might be possible if I ask you what is the population size of something very endangered like a tiger or a lion or a snow leopard. You can tell me, oh, this is the population size in India because they are only found in few pockets and we exactly know their number there. But if I ask something very, very mundane and general like a dog or a cat, which is present everywhere, you won't be able to tell me a population size, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in those cases where the population size can be huge, we have come across with a concept of population density. Now, what is a population density? Can anyone tell me? What do you understand by the term population density? Now, for population density, um, you don't have to necessarily measure numbers. This was one of the problem, but you can just look at a small area, okay, and look at how many do you find per in that particular area. So the how it works is it is how dense is a population, right? So if you find if you go to a jungle and I ask you, in one given area, you mark an area of 10 meter square, that is your study site. And in that area, you find, let's say, 200 um, small shrub, anything, any plant you take. Let's take a small plant like a uh, hmm, which plant should you take? Any plant, let's say carrot. You have 200, 300 carrot um, in a jungle compared to if I tell you how many mango trees were there in that area, naturally occurring, I'm not talking about a plant mango plantation. So you will find three or four, right? As compared to 200 or 300 carrots, wild carrots just growing. Make sense? Do you understand? Rabia, am I clear?
Yeah.
Let's try to draw a representation of it. Let's say this is a area, a patch of land, which is 10 meter by 10 meter. Okay. And I do not know the total number of any species in that whole jungle. This is just a small patch. I will take two, three different such patches, and I will find the occurrence of this red plant, red tree versus blue tree. Okay. So I found, let's say, 6 red or 7 red plants as compared to just 2 of the blue species. So I can say the population density of red is more than the population density of blue in that particular forest by just sampling a smaller area and then doing a random sampling at different places. So there's no bias. One can say that in this piece of land, this was the case, but if you go to another part of the area, another part of the forest, blue will be more. So that's why we take random 3, 4 different samplings and then we normalize it all. Correct? If you're doing it randomly, the chances of bias is less. Make sense, Iram, Rabia? Yes or no? So we are not talking about absolute numbers here. That's why population density is a better tool to study population dynamics in any given population, in a jungle or a forest or a city for humans, because we don't have to deal with absolute numbers. But how is a population density figured out or defined, right? So there is a proper formula for it, but let's see. Let's say I have to find a population density of anything, and I am denoting it with a capital N here. Okay. I don't know. Yeah. It could be the population density of ants, a banyan tree, or anything. Now let's first see what all adds to this. How can a population density change, whether individuals are added to the population or by individuals that are subtracted from population? So one thing that we know that always adds to any population is birth, right? So I'm denoting it as B, and it's called by technically it's called the natality rate. Natality is birth. So if I know about the birth per capita birth or the birth rate, I will know that it will always add to the population, correct? And if I know about the death, which I'm denoting here as D, which is called mortality. So the mortality factor will always remove from the population density, right? So the arrow will be this side and it will minus, correct? So these two factors we know already. Anything else that you studied, that we have studied, and we know that it can add or subtract from a population density? Sorry? If the yes, immigration, right? And what is immigration? Like, adding to the population, the same species individuals come from another part of the forest or another forest to this forest, let's say. So that's called immigration. So immigration always adds to population. I'm denoting it with I here. So it will be a adding factor. And what removes is then emigration. And I'm denoting it with the E here. Okay. These are the factors. Now, on the basis of this, just these symbols, let's try to write a simple, very, very simple formula. Okay. So the simple formula is, can you write a very simple formula? Formulas are nothing but a way to represent what we think is happening. So if I want to know the population density, which is N of any organism, what it will be? It will be
birth plus immigration minus death plus immigration.
right. Birth plus immigration, B plus I, minus death plus emigration, D plus C. So whatever adds minus whatever takes away, right? But in this case, it will only give me of. So when this is happening, when birth and immigration are happening, they are adding to something which is existing already, right? So birth happens to something, but you see there is a problem in this formula, and the problem is there is nothing on the opposite other side of equal. It is just birth and immigration. So as if like everything was zero and the first birth happened. That cannot be true. So we have to make certain like logical mathematical changes. It has to be something to begin with, like some n, some density has to be there to begin with, right? To which we add birth and death. Do you understand? And then we find density again. So this density, let's say, is at time t, which is the time at which we want to find. And then we want to find the change at time t plus 1 mathematically. So whenever we have to find the population density of any species at time t plus 1, we always say if the population density at time t, which is 2022, is this, then at 2023 it will be 2022 plus birth and immigration added minus death and emigration added. Does it make sense, Iram and Rabia?
Yes.
So this equation, how we got it is clear, right? Nt plus 1 is equal to nt plus in the bracket, and there has to be a bigger bracket also like this, b plus I minus d plus e. Cool.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Now, the most important thing in this chapter is based on this formula, and that is called growth models. So I am going to teach you two growth models. They are mathematical models, but they are used in population studies everywhere, not just for conservation of animals, but for human populations, for making policies for a country, and also during COVID or a pandemic to make vaccination programs. These growth models are always taken into account. So there are two kind of growth models. One is called exponential growth model, and the other is called logical or logistic growth model. And both these two type of growth models are based on certain differences in the availability of resources, right? That's the only difference. And one model is more practical than the other, and I'll teach you about both the models in the next class. So the next class is going to be a little more technical and less biological per se, I'll say. But at the end, we are going to use both the models for biology. So I want you, so in the next class, if I finish these two models, then we'll just need one more class to talk about population interactions, which is purely biological. Okay. So I want you to go back and read these two growth models, mathematical growth models from your book. And in NCERT, sometimes they write it in a very concise manner. So things become a little difficult to understand. You can also take help of internet to understand exponential growth model and logistical growth model. Okay, so this is your homework. And both the growth models are basically based on this particular formula here that we just built of population density. Okay, so we started very simple. Now it's time to go a step ahead and go more technical and mathematical. Cool. So I'll see you all in the next class where we will try to wind up this concept. Okay, Iram and Rabia.
Yes.
Okay, sir.
Perfect. So keep reading along with me, and things will be moving a little fast from here because all your fundamentals are in place. But at any given time, if you feel that we are going too fast over anything, feel free to interrupt and we can go over it again. We have buffer time with us, so I would like to use that time for preparing for entrances specifically, but without good fundamentals, there is no point preparing for entrances. We first have to build the foundation. So if you will keep reading with me, it will be easier and we will